Hello, everyone. Welcome to our Fireside Chat, Scaling Enterprise AR and VR Solutions. I'm Mike Bolin, Chief Analyst of Artillery Intelligence, and our guests today are Nathan Pettyjohn, who's Commercial AR and VR Lead at Lenovo. So welcome, Nathan.
Thanks, Mike. Great to be here. I'm excited for the discussion.
Yep, and Brian Robinson, who's XR Innovation Specialist at Bridgestone Americas. Welcome, Brian.
Hey, thanks, Mike. Thanks for having me.
Great. So we have a lot to get into with both of you. But before diving in, let's find out a bit more about each of you for context. So Nathan, starting with you, tell us a little bit about yourself and your role.
Sure. So as you mentioned, I'm the Commercial AR VR Lead at Lenovo. Been there for about a year and a half. My primary responsibilities are kind of managing a team that orchestrates our go-to-market strategy at a global level for augmented reality and virtual reality. And that includes software, hardware, and services. I'm also the president of the VR AR Association, have been for the last 5 years. So that gives me a really good, context and insights into not only enterprise, but also, the consumer side of AR and VR, where we're seeing a lot of those types of technologies actually being applied in the enterprise. So a comprehensive view of that.
Yeah, absolutely. Lots of great perspective there. We look forward to hearing more of what you have to say, Nathan. So, Brian, a little bit more about you and your role.
Yeah, sure. So I'm the innovation specialist at Bridgestone Americas. My main focus really is manufacturing in our plants and facilities and how we can innovate and use new technologies such as augmented reality and virtual reality to better our plants and make our people more efficient.
Absolutely. And it's good to have you here, Brian, too. From a personal note, I'll say that, I do a lot of these and I attend a lot of conferences kind of like we all do. And I think it's a rare opportunity to hear directly from a company that's implementing this stuff. So we really look forward to hearing about your learnings and your best practices and everything like that. So before we get into the discussion, and you guys also have some slides to show, for the sake of context, tell us a little bit about the relationship that you each have as companies. And how that started. I think that'll help kind of contextualize our discussion today. So, Brian, how did this relationship kind of kick off?
Sure. So we attended the EWTS 2019, which is the Enterprise Wearables Technology Summit last year. We actually had a class there where we taught how to implement or begin to implement augmented reality and virtual reality into a business such as ours and what we do. Lenovo was there, and one of the reps with Lenovo had a really good conversation with them and seeing what their focus was. And for me, that really what kind of surprised me over what you typically see there is their focus on really getting this into enterprise and at scale. And so our partnership kind of really began, or our relationship began kind of there, just talking about how they see virtual reality and augmented reality in a business form, and how we're interested in using that kind of technology and the interest of using multiple platforms or multiple hardware and software solutions that we can kind of package together. So that's kind of where it all started.
Nice. So speaking of, Lenovo's approach, its positioning, and its strategy to kind of bring these solutions to market, Nathan, you actually have some kind of introductory slides to further kind of contextualize what you're up to.
Thanks, Mike. Yeah, I thought it'd be good to kind of give a little perspective on Lenovo and our Think Reality brand and how we're approaching the ecosystem. So let me just share with you a little bit about Lenovo. So we're actually, for those who don't know, a $50 billion Fortune Global 500 company. There's 63,000 employees operating in over 180 markets around the world. We're focused on this kind of bold vision to deliver smarter technology for all. And we're developing world-changing technologies that create more inclusive and trustworthy and sustainable digital society. And so by designing, engineering, and building the world's most complete portfolio of smart devices and infrastructure, we're also kind of leading an intelligent transformation that we like to talk about. And that's really to create better experiences and opportunities for millions of customers around the world. And I just bring that up because it's really all about scalability, and we think about scale in everything we do. And as you can see here, we have about 100 million connected devices that we deliver annually. So there's a good track record of that, and we also try to focus on supporting and servicing those deliverables as well. So about a year and a half ago, we announced our Think Reality brand, which is Lenovo's brand for commercial AR and VR solutions. And it's really important emphasis on that word solutions, because we're known a lot of times for our hardware, like the Lenovo ThinkPad devices or even our Motorola phone business. But as we approached augmented reality, we realized it really has to be about a total solution. And I just wanted to point out too that we have this kind of customer first approach, and a lot of times that's easy to say, but it takes a lot of effort to really deliver on that. And so over the past actually 3 years, our team worked on just going out and talking with all of our Fortune 500 customers, understanding what they needed to truly scale. And what we found is there's a lot of great success stories around POCs and pilots, but this challenge of scalability for a lot of large enterprises with locations all over the world is still really challenging. We also took this approach where we went to customers and looked at them as partners, and what that meant was we gave them hardware at a very early stage. And I think Brian and Bridgestone is an example of one of these. We gave them a device, an early prototype. We gave them access to an early kind of even alpha version of our software platform. Him and his team are very innovative in their approaches and want to stay ahead of the market. And so them and about 50 other Fortune 500 customers we engaged with kind of gave us this feedback, and we molded that into what we call Think Reality now. That's really ready for commercial deployments. And again, kind of scalability as we look across software and we look across hardware and services, it quickly just escalates into this exponential complex ecosystem. So we're trying to resolve that for our customers like Bridgestone and make it easier so they can focus on their KPIs in their business.
Great. Thanks, Nathan. That actually gives us a lot to talk about in terms of sinking our teeth into some of those themes in our discussion. But first, what we're going to do is hear from Brian with some additional slides of what they're up to. So, Brian, take it away.
Thanks, Mike. Okay, so I just wanted to give a brief history and kind of a little bit of background of what we've been doing as a company and some of our focus. First and foremost, Bridgestone Americas is a tire manufacturer, for those who may not know. So our core business is manufacturing tires. And so my group, which is ESS, which is Engineering Services Support, actually provides all of the support and innovation for our manufacturing group. And so that's all of our plants in North, South, and Central America. A lot of what we deal with on the manufacturing basis is very industrial heavy. They're unique environments. We have unique challenges when it comes to infrastructure and everything else. And so we have to kind of take a creative approach on and how we tackle kind of even just our everyday problems and issues that may arise at the plants. So part of what's unique with that is there are so many technologies out there today that we can use and utilize to do a lot of different jobs. And this outline here kind of just gives you a brief example of what we do on a daily basis. A lot of what we have compromises really of doing the area and 3D laser scanning of all our plants. We have a lot of plants that have machines that are 30, 40 years old, and we don't have documentation on those. And so we go out and scan those so that we can get these 3D models that we can use to reproduce these machines and put them into a digital age, so to speak. With that being said, one big area of focus for us is the mixed reality approach. And so that's really virtual reality, augmented reality, and how we can utilize that for designs, maintenance, engineering, whatever it can be, and we can put it in mixed reality, virtual reality. That's what we do. So this day in the life process really is kind of our overreaching goal of how we want to utilize these technologies. From the beginning, we've done VR design review, putting new machines into VR before we send them off for final manufacturing and design. Then we kind of move to the AR side of things, where we can actually take those same machines and put them in augmented reality at the plant floor and really see what it looks like at a plant before we even get it built. Then it moves us into what's really a unique approach for us, which is training. For VR training, the idea is that we can take these machines before they're built and put into these factories and actually train the operators who will be using them on how to use the machine safely. And so there's no fear of all the pinching and opportunities for injuring yourself at a machine all through just VR design review or training. I'm sorry. And then we move into, what we think of as what's the next step past that. And the next step for us really is that augmented reality training. And so being able to overlay our training material, enhance it while they're at the actual machine to provide real-time feedback for them on how to really operate those machines. And then our ultimate goal for that is where do we move beyond that? And then part of that, which we'll discuss later, is getting past just these first initial, reviews and trainings, but how can we incorporate it as a daily use item at our plants that can actually better their process?
Great. Thank you, Brian. Lot for us to dive into there. So where you left off there, I think is a good segue because, I want to further define some of the opportunities around use cases. Where is AR and VR, Brian, you mentioned kind of the fusion of the two, being kind of deployed most, and where is it seeing the most value, and then where is it perhaps underserved at other kind of enterprise and industrial functions? So, Brian, you just mentioned a few great use cases, but where are you seeing the most kind of value? You mentioned training, you mentioned design, assembly, other use cases, and then Nathan, from your perspective, where is Lenovo kind of positioning and targeting Think Reality as a platform in terms of where you see the most demand for various kind of use cases and how that will continue to evolve? So, Brian, you first on the question of use cases.
Sure. Yeah, so we actually have a few use cases. One of them that I'll focus on a little bit, though, is this training aspect. When you think about training, is typically and traditionally we have PowerPoints and in-class training before anybody ever goes onto the plant floor. And from what we've learned, the best experience is the hands-on experience. And so we're trying to come up with ideas and ways and use cases of, well, how do we incorporate that hands-on training before they actually can even go and do the hands-on training? And so one of those areas was VR training. And when we look at VR training versus augmented reality training, the big thing for us is, VR, it's an enclosed system. They're basically closed off from their trainer or the supervisor who's helping them. And so that's an aspect of it that we're like, we don't really like that idea because it may be a little harder for them to start training these people when they're not seeing the physical person who's training them. And so we then moved kind of towards AR training, and we found a great compromise there is that, they're still able to see their surroundings. And so what's an opportunity for us would be obviously an operator at a machine. There's no better way than hands-on experience, but how can we create a safe and enhanced hands-on experience? And so, one of our big use cases is really that augmented reality training and getting operators to be able to utilize this technology safely at the machine. For example, we got to make sure that there's nothing obstructing their view when they're operating this machine. And so those are some of the challenges that we look at, especially with augmented and virtual reality. But to tie back into virtual reality, we think that's a great opportunity that when we do have these new machines or a new plant opening up and they don't have an opportunity to utilize that hands-on training at that particular machine because it may not be at another plant, is that we have that opportunity to go ahead and train them so that when they hit the ground running on the plant floor, they already know what that machine is. They already know how to go through their steps on that machine. And then we give them that augmented reality portion of it where that then it's helping them along and it's showing them, here's are your main steps, but you don't have to worry about all the intricate details that you may have tried to learn in a classroom setting or remember that PowerPoint that they showed you that may have 300 steps on it. It's now all in front of you in an augmented reality environment.
Yeah, and before we go to Nathan, are you also seeing the opportunity in those kind of training scenarios to record those sessions, to kind of capture the learnings and replicate that value, or you do things otherwise that kind of record things to kind of reconcile that famous skills gap that's kind of a challenge and an issue in the industrial world?
Yeah, absolutely. Traditionally what we do now is that when we find somebody who maybe has enhanced the process, we have a set of standards, but somebody goes, hey, I actually learned if we do this step before this step or something small like that, that it just makes it so much easier or quicker to go through their process. And so what we kind of do now is then we almost take a GoPro out there and record them going through all those processes, and then we can cut that video up into snippets, and so that then as you go through the training and say, okay, part 1A, whatever it may be, I've included this little video. But the opportunity with AR to also record them going through with the steps in front of them just brings context to the actual training that's available, and not just a video of somebody doing it and then me trying to reproduce it. You can see them doing it kind of real time as a recording.
Yeah. So Nathan, the same question to you with respect to use cases. And one thing that you characterized is Lenovo's scalability and its breadth of offering. So you're probably operating across the board, but are there any use cases that that over-index in terms of the demand you're seeing and the value you're providing to Bridgestone and others you work with?
Absolutely. So as we looked at, how do we deliver to this, at a global scale, we found a kind of a sweet spot in a few different verticals. So one of those being manufacturing. Manufacturing also has different flavors within inside of it. So, there's automotive, for example. Even within Bridgestone, they have these, retail locations, thousands of them, that kind of a blend of almost, retail, but more kind of manufacturing assembly type of scenarios. Then, we also have logistics ecosystem. So think of order picking and big warehouses as an example. Then we have architecture and engineering and construction. So the AEC market is another sweet spot. And then finally, kind of the fourth tier, which is much more horizontal, is this training that Brian's talked about. And you've got kind of like soft skills training as one area. And then you have much more involved training that might require, 6 degrees of freedom or augmented reality. So as we look at the verticals, we then kind of narrow that down and say, well, what use cases, to your point, Mike, what use cases are the primary ones that we can deliver on very consistently? And so I think, most people in the industry have heard this, but, I think remote assistance is one of the top use cases. Then the second being guided workflows, so kind of automating the workflow procedures. It can also be used in a training environment, but it helps a lot with compliance and like real-time compliance. And so those guided workflows have been shown to prove like 0% error rates in some manufacturing and assembly scenarios. And then, like I mentioned, is the training. But the use case a lot of times in training involves 3D visualization, especially in some of the augmented reality experiences that Brian mentioned. And so kind of delivering, with headsets or any type of device that can render, high fidelity 3D models, still have transparency where you can see your surroundings in front of you. These are all highly, technical and complex challenges. And many times they don't, require the same type of devices or software. So it gets complicated really fast in terms of how you deliver this. And especially, in a case like Bridgestone, where they have many different use cases, many different types of users, requires different types of headsets, different types of software environment too.
Yeah, and one of the use cases you mentioned is remote assistance. And in my industry discussions, a lot of the things that I've kind of heard is that that's one of the use cases that has relatively lower barriers to entry compared to others, because there are comfort levels where there's still a human involved, as opposed to perhaps pre-authored kind of assistance. And that's a segue into what I want to talk about next, which is to move from the what, which is the use cases we've been talking about, to the how, which is the implementation. And I know that there are a lot of challenges there, so I think we have a unique opportunity to hear from both of you about best practices in implementation. So Brian, from your perspective, the things that you've done, and you alluded to this in your slides, whether it's internal communications, whether it's, workflow integrations, what are some of the best practices?
Sure. Let's talk about some of the challenges. I think the first and foremost, the biggest one to me that I find as a challenge, at least, and that I can foresee other people having as a challenge, is infrastructure. With what Nathan alluded to about remote assist being a big thing, obviously, with COVID and everything, everybody that has an interest in this kind of technology. And for me, infrastructure, and what I mean by infrastructure, I kind of split it into two areas. It's connectivity, getting a device connected, and then it's the management of that connectivity, making sure that we're managing the resources and that it's not overloading networks, et cetera. And so part of that big challenge is I have a unique position that each of our plants, you can consider them almost of their own little cities. They operate different from other plants, and each of them have a network and they have standards for that network, but each of them have varying degrees of how much equipment may be on the network. And so it's one of those things that when you ask, hey, can I put this HoloLens on a network? First of all, they ask what a HoloLens is. And so then you explain what this technology and the device is and what we're trying to do with it. But then the second part of it is what kind of bandwidth requirements do I need for this device? And that really does vary. I mean, if it's just when you look at a training perspective of it, you might not be online all the time. Maybe you're just updating it or bringing in new updates as you update your training, et cetera. And then you only need an internet connection briefly for that updating. The other part of it is like for remote assist, where it's a continuous stream for any amount of time. And so the biggest challenge with that is just getting the buy-in from our plants to allow us to connect the device to the internet, to allow us to actually utilize these technologies. Now, a big part of that too is that some people say, okay, sure, let's just get a MiFi. We can bypass the whole plant thing and let's just put it on a mobile network. Well, our plants are also unique in the sense that if you walk into the middle of the plant, you're in a complete dead zone with no cell service and anything like that. So for us, it's really critical to get it on the network and it being managed on the network appropriately. Another challenge for us that it's something that's ever evolving is cost. Every time we talk about, hey, let's implement something like this, let's bring this to your plant, it's how much is it going to cost me? And that number varies greatly depending on what you're trying to do, whether it's remote assist or a training initiative. From a remote assist perspective, for example, is out of all the platforms available, everybody uses a form of per user licensing. And what comes with that is there's an annual renewal and then somebody has to budget for it. And so when people are open to using the technology, but then I have to start telling them I have to charge them for it, we start running into, I don't know, that sounds cool, but we don't have it in the budget. I don't want to try it. And so, it's finding creative ways around that. And so part of that and kind of best practices and lessons learned from that is, number one, if we can get buy-in from our corporate IT and they consider it a managed device of Bridgestone, for example, I can then push that to the plant and say, hey, I've got corporate IT buy-in. They say, put it on your network, but how can I help you get this on the network? And I want to make you successful. I want this to be a success story for you guys to say, hey, this plant's using this technology such as a HoloLens or a RealWear or whatever it may be to communicate remotely, especially during this time. The other aspect of it too with the cost of it is I try to take the cost out of it. And I try to put it as, let me just show you. Let me let you borrow it. I'll cover this cost for now. Let me let you borrow it, and let's do a couple of use cases with you. Do a couple of calls. Let's get somebody in here that's never used it before. And generally, what I see from there is as soon as they do it, they see it work, and that's really the key. They see it work, and the only way to get it to work is make sure we got it on the internet and that we're providing them, the right device and the right software. But the moment they see it work, it's no longer about the cost. It's about how quickly can I implement this. And with all of that, obviously the biggest proponent of this is getting, kind of our executive and corporate buy-in. And to me, and for what we do, the best way to do that is to get the plant buy-in. And so if we can show that a plant's actively using this technology, it's one of those things that it's almost like, I can't believe the plant's using this. They're these big factories that take so much to work and run, and they've been running like this for so long that when you implement or introduce something new, such as a HoloLens, that sometimes people think, it's never going to work. But this moment we can show a little bit of success, whether it's just simply calling somebody back, in our corporate headquarters and having that live call at a machine, that blows them away. And so then that kind of really opens the doors to, hey, let's use this technology. What else can it do? What can we do with this? And then they just start getting those gears turning on, how can we use this? Is great. I want to use it. And then they start coming back to you and saying, hey, what if we tried this? And so, for me, if we can get past that infrastructure hurdle and we can get past that cost the potential of the cost, it just opens so many doors for them, and they just start getting excited when we start including them in these kind of new initiatives.
Yeah, one thing that jumps out there is the number of stakeholders that you have to kind of win over. And it seems like a lot of that is, obviously technical in the infrastructure matters you mentioned, but also the playbook of marketing and communications in terms of just
Yeah.
like angling something to all of these different stakeholders. So Nathan, over to you. Same question of implementation, but from your perspective as a provider, how have you positioned Think Reality to really accommodate a lot of the things Brian just mentioned in being a kind of hardware agnostic and turnkey solution?
Sure. Yeah, so I'd like to share a few things with you, but first to kind of transition from what Brian said, when you look at the stakeholders, we've tried to approach this by, how do we deliver value for the business manager, the IT manager, the developer, and the end user, and that's a lot to try to please, but we've taken this kind of total solution approach. So I wanted to share with you kind of how we're thinking about this. And so as you can probably see here, essentially we've got a software, hardware, and services. And these are kind of the three pillars that we're focused on delivering on. And I'll dive into a little bit deeper in how we try to enable our customers in all these areas. And this is constantly evolving, especially with the software. It's constantly being iterated and improved upon. But as we look at the software, there's really kind of these three key categories. One is a development platform. The next is a cloud platform and services. And then finally, like turnkey apps and solutions. And so with that development platform, there are some customers that say, hey, I want to build something custom. And we offer a Unity SDK to be able to do that. There's other customers who say, hey, I'd kind of like a sample app, but then I want to really customize around it. And so we have extendable sample apps where customers can do that. We've pulled in other software tools like being able to deliver full mixed reality support, input methods like voice, gesture, gaze control, even controller methods. We've gone another step and actually included image recognition into our SDK, so you don't have to go ahead and pull another service. We've partnered with a company called Wikitude on that. And so like this whole development kind of ecosystem is there for the customers that want to use that. Then we have cloud platform services, which includes this online management portal. It does have its own MDM support, but we also support third-party MDMs as well. There's user and app provisioning. There's microservices. As you can see, we can deliver a hosted solution or on-prem. We find a lot of our customers may have multiple cloud environments, when you look at a global level, and they might have certain scenarios where they need on-prem deliverables. So we've considered that as well. Then if we look at the turnkey apps and solutions, we've taken an approach to not just create like an app ecosystem, but we go in and we work with kind of really key partners that we think we can integrate, so that there's a single sign-on, there's user authentication, and all that kind of works together. And so we've done that within kind of mixed reality with a company called Hollow1, and they really help in fulfilling those kind of 4 key use cases that we find with customers. There's another company called Uptail that we're compatible with that has a VR training module that allows for like integration into learning management systems and true training scenarios, in virtual reality. And then, the second pillar is hardware. So we're unique in that we have our own Lenovo-based hardware, but we also support third-party devices because, again, we've got to please all these stakeholders and all these use cases. And many times, somebody may not want a mixed reality device. They might want a monocular device, or they might want a mobile device. So, for example, like in AR, we have our Think Reality A6. Has full mixed reality capabilities. We can also deliver the solution on an Android-based mobile device. And then, we also support devices like RealWears for scenarios where like a monocular, very lightweight device is best suited. In VR, we have our own VRS3 device. It's the Mirage VRS3. It's great for high scalability, kind of 3 degrees of freedom training scenarios for soft skills. We also have a partnership with Vario, which delivers like 8K resolution, ultra high fidelity for certain types of design scenarios and eye tracking. And of course, there's more to come in terms of partners and even Lenovo hardware that everybody should stay on the lookout for. But we're just continually trying to deliver what the customer needs, whether that's Lenovo based or pulling in third parties. And then kind of this final enabler I think that's really important is services. And not only is it services for customer service like device warranty. We also know, like in these scenarios, we need engineers on hand that can answer a call and say, "Hey, let me help you troubleshoot if you're having an issue. Is this a network problem or a software?" So we're standing that up at a global level to be able to provide for our customers. And then finally, professional services. Lenovo has a great track record of working with some of the biggest systems integrators in the world. And a lot of our customers have those relationships in place, and they're eager to kind of pull those into a mixed reality or virtual reality environment. And then some customers we've learned have said, "Hey, we'd rather you just kind of deliver that. We want you to integrate into our ERP system or our learning management system." And so we've been working really hard to kind of stand up internal professional services so that we can, deliver ultimately this total solution. And so that's a lot, but it kind of showcases how we're trying to enable the customer from start to finish and across software, hardware, and services.
Great, thanks, Nathan. That certainly characterized the kind of breadth of offerings and how Lenovo is positioning the platform to really optimize all levels of demand in the market. So it's good to see that. I think there's a lot we can learn from that. So we're actually almost out of time here, but in kind of winding down, I want to hear final thoughts from each of you, either to kind of cap off some of your biggest takeaways or tell us about what you're excited that you're working on now and what we can expect from each of your companies in the near term. So Brian, why don't we start with you?
Sure. My big takeaway from all of this, especially now with some of the information that, Nathan has provided, is that we're trying to move past this POC, pilot, proof of concept phase. And when we're talking about implementing it is really how do we scale it and getting past that proof of concept. And so, the unique opportunity that we have here is that Lenovo is providing a platform that's enterprise ready, that has that scalability, and that we're really looking to see, how can we take that and use that to utilize all these different technologies, both software and hardware, and create a solution we're not focusing on the hardware software, but we're focusing on getting it in the hands of every user that we have.
Good. Well said, Brian. So Nathan, you get the last word.
Great, thanks. Well, I mirror what Brian said. The focus is all on scalability right now. We're also excited to be implementing new technology that are going to make devices faster, more lightweight, and just ultimately easier to deploy. We're honored and excited to be working with Bridgestone and working towards a very successful kind of broad deployment. So thanks a lot, Brian, and thanks, Mike.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's all the time we have. I want to thank you both for lots of good insights and a fun discussion.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you all for watching, and stay tuned for a lot more sessions from VR AR Global Summit. So this has been Scaling Enterprise AR and VR Solutions. I'm Mike Boland. Thanks for watching.